Dylan, just introduce, just say hello.
Well, good evening and welcome, Shalom, and meeting new people and friends. And what a wonderful night we're going to have tonight with Dr. Mike Kelly and Rob Schneider tonight. Two wonderful speakers, and I'm certainly looking forward to it as well as many others. So enjoy this wonderful night, and I will now hand you over to Barbara.
Okay, so welcome all again, and we're going to start with Dr. Mike Kelly, and then we have Rob Schneider. We've got the most awesome speakers tonight. So, um, Dr. Kelly is one of the founding co-convenors of Labour Friends of Israel, which was established in late 2023. He served in the Australian Army, including deployments in Somalia, Bosnia, Timor-Leste, Iraq, and a hostage recovery mission in Africa. How amazing is all of that? He served as director of the UN, NATO, Europe, Peacekeeping, the Middle East, and Africa in the ADF Strategy Group, including managing crises in Timor-Leste and Lebanon in 2006. Mike was a member of the Australian Parliament, serving as Assistant Minister for Defence, including responsibility for the transition of operations in Afghanistan, and as Minister for Defence Material. He was also a member of the Australian Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. So an amazing bio, and there's so much more, but look, we are going to be very blessed to hear from him now. So over to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara, Norman. Really great to be with you and with everyone. And can I start by just acknowledging, I know we're all over the place, so I'm just going to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all of our lands, but I'm particularly on the Ngunnawal lands here in the ACT. And I pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and in particular to what beautiful people that it was my privilege to represent in the region around the ACT, the Wiradjuri and the Yuin peoples of the coast. Look, it's wonderful to be talking to a group that cares about Israel and cares about getting to the truth in the Middle East. And when the guys asked me to talk tonight, they asked me they give a bit of the personal connection background and talk about some of the specific areas of knowledge and experience, bitter experience, a lot of scar tissue in relation to the Middle East that are relevant to this. So I'll get started on that. I'm going to share my screen with you, and hopefully this comes up, and we'll see how we go with the technology. So can you all see that screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So the part of the problem with this, as we know, is there's also along with a denial of a lot of the Indigenous rights and connection and the ownership of an entire continent that was stolen from them here in Australia. You've got this process of, and the concept terra nullius. We're seeing that kind of thing being attempted to be perpetrated on the Jewish people of Israel, an attempt to deny their indigeneity and their connection. And as we would say here in Australia, the truth is that sovereignty was never ceded. But when I engage with people, and here's a picture of Alicia Payne's office here in the ACT with a young woman demonstrating in front of the office there. She actually told me she was also a lesbian. So we had an interesting conversation about how she might get treated if she was living in Gaza, etc., or anywhere really in the Middle East other than Israel. But, I asked her about the sign from the river to the sea. And I said, what would happen to the Jews living there if you got rid of Israel and you got rid of them? What's the story with them? And she said, oh, they just have to go back to where they came from. So I said, well, do you know that Israel is where they came from? And if you go to Jerusalem, you will see the remains of a thousands-year-old temple underneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. And she didn't know anything. So there was this incredible void of ignorance there, which is what frustrates me the most. And it's like these days, all you have to do is go and put on a keffiyeh and you become an instant history expert, geopolitical expert, law expert, and everything else besides, and also military strategist. So I wasted 40 years of my life when I could have just gone out and bought a keffiyeh. But interestingly, too, for those that wear the keffiyehs, they don't realise that they were actually invented, the ones they wear, by a British Army officer in the late 40s. And if you'd have worn it in Gaza, you would have been killed or arrested by Hamas as being a supporter of Fatah. So now I notice they're kind of adopting it because it's gained such chic, around the world. But anyway, this is our challenge: misinformation and ignorance. So it's something that I care a lot about, and it goes back to a very deep family connection to the Middle East. I had a lot of family in the First World War who served in the Light Horse, and back at that time, the issue of the Jewish community of what became Israel was really very obviously supportive of our troops, looked after them beautifully, and formed a really close bond with them. And the troops even came across them in Alexandria before they got into that Palestine area, because they had, a lot of them had been expelled by the Turks because they were perceived as being supportive of the Allies. And so our light horsemen went up to the refugee camps in Alexandria and took the kids for horse rides, etc. So my family was part of that. That's the gentleman on the left there, TJ Kelly, who started the Bega Light Horse Troop back at the beginning of the 1900s. 1800s. So this is also a story that was continued on through the Second World War with my grandfather's aunts and uncles, because every generation of my family has served in the Australian Army. And at that time, again, the Yishuv had grown even more, and our troops in the Palestine area, which was by this stage known as the Palestine Mandate, were really beautifully looked after. And it really comforted me a great deal, because I know, for example, this is my grandfather on my father's side. There's a sergeant in the 2nd, 3rd Machine Gun Battalion. He ended up from the Middle East, going to fight in the Pacific, and ended up on the Burma-Thai Railway and suffered enormously through a number of years through the war, and was medevaced out as a sort of human skeleton in September of 45, and was in Heidelberg Hospital in Victoria, unfortunately survived. But that time that he was so well looked after must have been, at least one warm experience he could think back on, as was my grandfather on my mother's side here on the right-hand side. So this is actually a quote from the 7th Division's War Diary, which actually talked about how well they were looked after. And, they talked about the hospitality of the surrounding Jewish settlements. They were, the 7th Division was based up in the north of the Palestine Mandate. And every night the troops were going over there until the CO felt that he had to limit the movements a bit because it was getting too much of a thing. And they were so well looked after that eventually, when they did leave, the troops pulled together to get some money together to donate a piano to the settlements. So just highlights that coming out of the Middle East, in my family and thousands of Australian families, they were aware of this, and they were aware of the hostility that they faced from others who were there, who were supporters of the Nazis. In my own time too, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, or to do with the Middle East. So including my first deployment to Somalia. And a lot of my time in the army was spent defending Muslims, largely from other Muslims. And this is one example of them. 300,000 Somalis had died by the time we got there, in the people that we were sent to look after. 70% of their children had already been killed, and 40% of the population as a whole. It was specifically an actual genuine genocide going on against those Rakhine people. And even to this day, I'm still attempting to get the colleagues that worked with us out here as refugees, and just was in communication with one today, in fact. But I went on from there. Also, I spent a year in Iraq. And then beyond that, when I was in the strategy group in defence, that responsibility for the Middle East led me to have a lot of contact with countries in that region. I spent time in Qatar, Kuwait, Jordan, and of course a lot of time in Israel, and dealing with all the officials of those regions, including sitting down often with also with the officials of the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. So that's my sort of experience with it. I know a lot about the region from the dealings that I've had to have, and so I go back to some of the mythologies, and I want to just give some examples of some of the misconceptions and lack of knowledge that exists. You'll see this is a map of the actual Ottoman provinces just before the British Mandate and the end of the First World War, and nowhere on that map will you find reference to something called Palestine. You've seen the Damascus Vilayet there, and you've got Sanjaks and the Mutasaffarit of Jerusalem, but nothing that resembles remotely something that could be called Palestine. And in fact, in history, there's never been a state of Palestine. It's only ever been an independent state as a Jewish entity. And all of the thousands of years of history that have existed since the recorded history, Jews have continuously lived in that land. They've never been not present in that land. And those that were dispersed and, carried away as slaves or sent abroad or expelled, many thousands of them went into the Arab countries and other, and in Egypt, etc., all around that area before they became Arabic, and of course across to Spain and into Europe. Interestingly, there's studies genetically which show that even the European Ashkenazi Jews who were residing there from the expulsion have this very strong component of what they call the Canaanite gene, which was the origins of the Jewish tribe that became the Jews that we know today. So that Canaanite gene is present very strongly throughout history and in the Jewish community today. The mandate itself, people often tell you that it's because of the Balfour Declaration, but that was actually just a letter that the British wrote to a couple of people in the Jewish committee in England who were pushing for this. But it did reflect the policy of the Allies. And it was mainly because of Woodrow Wilson's philosophy and plan to have the so-called 14 points implemented to recognise the right to self-determination of minority peoples and peoples in the world who are living under imperial sort of rule. This resulted then in the League of Nations that was established after the First World War, issuing a formal legal document, which you can see on the right there, giving Britain a mandate to create a Jewish state in this Palestinian mandate. The Arabs at the time complained about the use of this word Palestine. They said, "Oh, that's got nothing to do with us. It's just some Jewish invention. We call this South Syria." So it's interesting now that we, have such attachment to that term, when at the time it was considered representative of the area that was going to become a Jewish state. And it was in 1947 that the Jews of the mandate decided that they would call it Israel in the end. So it was a legally mandated territory, but this is not to say that, of course, after Arab invasions of the region in the 7th century, etc., that you didn't have a community of Arabs who have an attachment to that land as well. So the issue is, how do we resolve this dilemma of having to accommodate two peoples with a connection to that land? But as far as the Indigenous peoples go, it was the Jewish community that qualifies for that title. It's also interesting that a lot of the Arab leaders at the time, run over history, they had many opportunities to create a Palestinian state, from the Peel Commission report in 1938 through to the partition plan that Doc Evatt was largely responsible for creating a Labor identity at the time and supported by the Australian Labor government. Then there was the 20 years in which the West Bank was controlled by Jordan and the Gaza Strip by Egypt. Could have been done then, could have been through the Ehud Barak's proposals, the Oslo process, Ehud Olmert's plan, etc. So they have many opportunities, but they all keep telling you that the only reason there was a mandate and that there's an Israeli state is because the Europeans were feeling guilty about the Holocaust. And the truth is that the Arab leadership was deeply involved in the Holocaust. And here, this is a picture of Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was specifically the leader of Palestinians. He was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And he went straight to Germany at the beginning of the war and urged Hitler not to expel Jews anymore. He said, if you expel the Jews, they'll just come to us. What you need to do is to burn them. And he really agitated heavily for this, and he was hoping that the Germans would be successful in their campaigns and overrun the region, and then it would be possible to eliminate all the Jews altogether from all over the planet, effectively. And so he spent the entire war years in Germany, in Europe, and he worked closely with Heinrich Himmler on suggesting the final solution. And he raised SS division from the Bosnian Muslim population. Here he is reviewing his Bosnian Muslim SS troops. He also visited concentration camps. Here he is at one of those camps. So he was a part of the whole process, an architect of the final solution, so bear just as much responsibility for the Holocaust as anyone else. So I mentioned the opportunities that there have been, but this then comes to some of the lies that are told. And this, you'll see this graphic shown quite regularly by the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian demonstrators. This is one of the examples of how you can create lies from graphics. So the first one is trying to say that 1946 there was a state of Palestine, which you now know, and you already knew probably, that it didn't exist. And what they show with that graphic is completely misleading. So what it's meant to be is the green is meant to be Arab land and the white is Jewish settlements. What they're showing, though, in fact, is the government-owned land, the land that was owned publicly by the Ottomans that was to be handed over to a Jewish state. So yes, there was an Arab population there. Originally, it was quite small, and all through the 19th century, for large parts of that, the majority population in Jerusalem was actually the Jewish population. But a lot of Arabs came into the region because of the economic activity that the Jewish community generated. And the Jews that settled there were buying land. They didn't throw anybody out when they were settling the land. They were purchasing land legitimately and settling it. A lot of it was land that was not wanted by anybody else because it was malaria-ridden swamps, etc. But this is a lie, this first graphic. There was no state of Palestine, and it contains the government-owned land. So this is how they sell their story. This picture here you'll see is of the founding of Tel Aviv in 1909, and you'll see that it was just on empty sand dunes on the Mediterranean coast. And of course, this is what the Jewish community have done with Tel Aviv today. No one was expelled, thrown out, or driven from the land to create Tel Aviv. It's also interesting to keep it in context. People always think of Israel as this, monolithic, huge military beast that dominates the region and, is the big Goliath, and everybody else are all poor, underdogs, sort of fending off this military and aggressive country. That is Israel. If you see there, the little strip of blue in the context of the dark green is the Arab countries of the Middle East and North Africa, and the light green is also the Islamic Council. So the only country in the world that's a Jewish state where Jews can go as refugees, that can be a voice for them in the councils of nations, is this tiny strip of land here in Israel. Now, in Australia, of course, we have electorates in federal elections, and I used to be the member for a seat called Eden Monaro, which is this one here, just in the corner of New South Wales. Oops, sorry, I'll just take you back one. And so Israel is half the size of my old electorate, half the size of it. So we stole an entire continent and we're not planning, no one's suggesting they're going to hand back the houses that they live on. None of these left-wing people who wear their kafirs are proposing to hand back and leave the country. But here they are trying to take away this tiny strip of country from the Indigenous people in the Middle East. And just to highlight they talk about the people that fled in 1948 as the Great Nakba. What it was as a Nakba actually was the humiliation of losing to a much smaller Jewish community and army. But around this period, you saw a massive expulsion of the Jews who were living in all of the Arab countries of North Africa and the Middle East, and close to 1 million people. And if you go to some of them now, and I was in Iraq when there were only a handful left of Jews of an ancient community that went back to the days of Babylon, where the Bible was written in Babylon, and with tremendous rich heritage. They were the musical heartbeat of Iraq. Now there's none left. So this is what ethnic cleansing looks like, okay? Not what's happened to the Arabs in Israel, which have gone from 156,000 to 2.1 million, fully incorporated citizens of the country who vote, form political parties, and have actually been in coalition government as well at times. And also in Gaza, they've gone from 80,000 to 2 million. So it's not very successful genocide or ethnic cleansing. There used to be a millennial-old Jewish and Christian community in Gaza. Of course, there are 0 Jews there now, and there are only a handful of Christians left who are just kept on as tokens at the moment. I don't think there's going to be any left there soon. So I became very closely involved with Gaza in 2005 when I had the Middle East desk, because effectively I was trying to convince the government to allow me to assist the Palestinian Authority to develop its security sector, and I was able to deploy Australian Army personnel there because in 2005 also the Israel completely withdrew from Gaza, everything, left behind agricultural infrastructure, etc. And as soon as they left, then the violent elements of the community destroyed all of that. But Israel persisted and tried to create, an economic future for Gaza in tourism, etc., to create a port, an airport. But when they had the election in 2006, Hamas officials dominated in Gaza and then fought a civil war in 2007 with Fatah and killed 600 of their fellow Palestinians. And since then have tyrannized the community. And you cannot live there as a free gay person, free trade unionist, don't expect elections, women have no rights, etc. 17 years also of assaults launched from Gaza onto Israel. So the reason why there's no Palestinian state is largely because Hamas has prevented the Palestinian Authority from establishing full authority over both territories, because they refuse to accept the quartet criteria of recognition of Israel, renunciation of violence, and acceptance of all agreements that have been entered into so far. So that's why we don't have a Palestinian state, but also why Israel has to be at war with Hamas, because it seeks Israel's destruction. If you read the Hamas covenant, you'll understand their genocidal agenda, etc. And this wall, does anybody can tell me whereabouts this is in Israel, this wall? So it's a trick question. It's actually the border between Gaza and Egypt. So people don't often refer to the fact that Egypt shares a wall with Gaza and has the same security concerns with Hamas. And Hamas, of course, trains their kids from 12 years old to be terrorists, and starts getting them into the fighting by the ages of 15 and 16, etc. And they're taught to hate, to demonize Jews, and that all is fair in fighting Jews: rape, murder, slaughter, old people, disabled, whatever it is. And I just want to sort of draw the connection with what you're seeing in Lebanon and Gaza, which is a war. It was a war of aggression that was started by Hamas and Hezbollah in Iran, pulling the strings, and the Houthis in Yemen. And in a war, in an urban environment, you will see, obviously, terrible things and great destruction. And I have seen those many times myself personally. When we fought in Fallujah, when we conducted the operation in Mosul. So these photos I'm showing you here are from the battle we fought in Mosul. The air campaign, a 9-month siege, similar sized population to Gaza, 40,000 buildings were destroyed, 47 mosques, hospitals, and the same sort of images that you're seeing now coming out of those places like Gaza and Lebanon, the very same images. These are images from Mosul. So this is war, and it's appalling, and every single civilian life is unacceptable. So that's why you don't start wars. And Israel is trying to end the situation of constant hostility they faced for 18 years from Hezbollah and 17 years from Hamas. And those attacks have not ceased since October the 7th on a daily basis. So they're fighting a war for survival, and this is the consequences. I won't talk about the sort of propaganda heritage of all this because I need to hurry up here, but the examples of stuff that's in their educational textbooks in Palestinian territories by UNRWA, a UN agency. This is a picture of all the infidels, Christians, Jews, etc., being burnt in the hellfires. This is a school textbook for kids. And now we're starting to see the old examples of Nazi anti-Semitism appearing in stickers and posters and flags, etc. This was one just near me in Canberra, reflecting all the old stuff we saw back in the old days, where the Nazis demonised Negroes and Jews, etc., as they called the Black Paris, Black French, Black, whoever they were, and combined their identity with the Jews as well. They were the same evil, etc. Just on the statistics of the casualties, they'll cite a figure of 40,000. It's a nonsense figure that's made up. I would guess that maybe the civilian casualties, still horrendous, has been around maybe as high as 10,000, maybe not. But there have been 21,000 Hamas fighters killed in Gaza. They had under arms about 40 to 50,000 people, as well as tens of thousands of rockets and 500 kilometres of underground military infrastructure. So casualties would be expected, but Israel has really worked extremely hard to prevent those wherever possible. And they've facilitated food deliveries. People will tell you that all the hospitals have been bombed and destroyed, but 16 of the 36 hospitals they had serving 2 million people are still operational. The rest have not been bombed at all. They're just not serviceable at the moment because of things like utilities and all that. But in their place, Israel has overseen the establishment of 14 field hospitals and 3 hospital ships, and there are 9 mobile medical clinics, and 134 new ambulances have come into the area. If you were intent on destroying a people, you wouldn't be doing this. They've also run an extensive vaccination program, and they've completed the polio vaccination program through the Gaza Strip now as well. You wouldn't be doing those things if you were committing a genocide. And I'll just finish on, this is the actual key thing that the ICJ and its process, I guarantee you will not find there's genocide happening in the territory. The former president, Joan Donoghue, said in an interview on the BBC that the misinterpretation of their initial proceeding that there was a plausible genocide is a complete falsehood. That's not what they found at all. And importantly, when you're interpreting that convention, you have to understand the really, really tough criteria to establish genocide. And part of the legal process of interpreting a treaty in international law is to look at the preparatory work for the treaty. And this is what this paragraph here is what the drafters of the convention had to say about the type of situations in which you see war casualties and which do not relate to the crime of genocide. It is a legal concept, so you can't be bandying it around as a colloquial term. It was born at the end of the Second World War as a legal concept and as part of the convention, and it is completely false, completely counterproductive to seeing strength to the convention to be undermining it in the way they are doing it. They're talking about it. I won't say any more than that at the moment. But I think, I'm on the side of Israel because I oppose Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. I believe in women's rights. I believe in free trade unionism and free elections. I believe in people not committing genocide, and also on respect for religions and for the indigeneity of peoples where they belong. So that's all I have to say, and I look forward to talking more.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. We so appreciate, Mike. You covered a lot of territory there and were very, very informative in debunking a whole lot of myths that have been going around. So much appreciated. And we'll hear a bit more from you later when we have our Q&A. So we're going to be handing over to Rob Schneider now. And just to introduce Rob, and so Rob is a renowned conservationist, businessman, and Jewish community leader in Sydney. The honorary Australian representative of the Israel Nature and Parks Authority, Israel Nature and Heritage Foundation, the honorary Australian representative of the Council for a Beautiful Israel, board member of the Australian Friends of Israel, Philharmonic Orchestra, board member of the William Cooper Legacy Project, member of the Karen Kainmeth, I'll probably not pronounce that properly, but the Israel World Chairman's Forum, contributor, Mansam Online Magazine. Wow, what a list. Consultant, ARRC Wildlife Trust New Zealand, Development Director, Sydney Jewish Museum, 2014 to 2018, CEO of the Jewish National Fund of Australia, 2000 to 2013, and Committee of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. Rob is an old friend. Shall I say Mike is a new friend? Rob is an old friend. And we'll ask you to unmute Mike. We've had, sorry, Robert, we've had a lot to do with Rob. Can you unmute yourself there? We've had a lot to do with Rob over the years through the William Cooper project, and when Rob was with JNF, and amazing work that he's done. And also we saw him in Israel in 2017 at the 100th anniversary of the Lighthouse Charge at Beersheba. So over to you, Rob, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Right, let me start off. Thank you, Barbara and Norman. I'd also like to acknowledge my old friend Mike. It's so good to see him looking well, because when he retired from Parliament, he was going through a bit of a rough time. And we thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, Mike. And as Barbara said, new eyes, new facets to a problem that's existed for so many years. My old friend Ron Weiser always says that to say that this problem only started after 1967 is absolutely nonsense, because they've never wanted Jews in the land of Israel. And I repeat, the land of Israel. So going back to my time with JNF, and by the way, Barbara didn't mention that today I'm involved with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and we have actually established a scholarship, a memorial scholarship in honor of William Cooper, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Coming from JNF, obviously people know that the JNF was involved with planting of trees and how important a tree is to life. The tree of life, first mentioned in Genesis, is common to many religions. As a conservationist, I'm very much aware of the value of trees to life, both human and animal. I apologize that I didn't prepare a PowerPoint or anything, but I hope that my words will resonate and that you'll appreciate what I've got to say. It's this symbology of a tree that I applied when, as a member of the Israeli delegation at the World Summit on Sustainable Development held in Johannesburg in 2002. After being introduced by the MC to speak at an event during the summit, I clarified who I was by using a tree to describe my life. I said that the roots of my tree, like for all Jews, are in our eternal homeland, Israel, that the trunk of my tree are my formative years in South Africa, and the branches of my tree brought me to Australia. And I said that all parts of the tree are sacred to me. Why are my roots in Israel so important to me? Because almost 4,000 years ago, when God revealed himself to Abraham, God said to Abraham, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. And that's Genesis 12.1. And in Genesis 12.7, just have to refer to my notes, to your offspring I will give this land. And of course, we Jews, being descendants of Abraham, are therefore inextricably linked to the land of Israel, even when exiled from it. We are the indigenous people of the land of Israel. Earlier this month, a group of about 60 indigenous representatives from around the world, and I'm very happy to see Shireen here online with us, gathered in Jerusalem to convey the message that Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel. The event was organized by the Indigenous Embassy Jerusalem, founded by Cherie Trotter, a Maori scholar and founder of the Holocaust and Anti-Semitism Foundation in New Zealand, together with a former member of the New Zealand House of Representatives, Alfred Ngaro, with the support and participation of one of my Hebrew University professors, Wayne Horowitz, an archaeologist and expert on the ancient Near East and Assyriology, who will be visiting Australia and New Zealand mid-2025. The organization aims to change the narrative that Jews are foreign colonizers who have dispossessed the Palestinians, and which narrative ignores the thousands of years of deep connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. Harvey Yesno, a Grand Chief of the Ojibwe tribe from Thunder Bay in northwestern Ontario in Canada, summed it up most eloquently when he said, we believe that the people of Israel are indigenous to this land. History proves it, archaeology proves it. And interestingly enough, we as the Australian Friends of the Hebrew University have a partnership with Australian Catholic University in a program called the Ancient Israel Program, where students from ACU travel to Israel and participate in a dig. And you can imagine when they dig up an artifact that demonstrates the Jewish connection with the land of Israel, they become our strongest ambassadors. And sadly, this year, due to the war, the group were unable to visit Israel, but we're hoping that next year that there will be peace and the group will be able to travel again. Let me now refer to the trunk of my tree, my formative and young adult years in South Africa, where I was privileged to be exposed to the true indigenous people of the region, the Bushmen, the Sand Bushmen, who occupied an area where we established the Wilderness School to teach environmental values to children of all races and creeds at a time when this was not done in apartheid South Africa. In fact, not only was this not done, the done thing, but farmers near the school threatened to stone the buses that were bringing these mixed groups of young South Africans to spend a few days at Lapalala Wilderness, learning about nature and how to respect and cohabit with it. And I would like to acknowledge Barbara's stance at the time in the anti-apartheid fight and war. So we salute you, Barbara, for that. The area included numerous Bushman paintings demonstrating the Bushman's kinship with animals, to the extent that a book titled When Animals Were People was published by a good friend of mine, Bert Woodhouse, highlighting the connection of Bushmen to the land. One of the key things I learned, and it stayed with me through to this day, was from Bushman law that whether hunting or harvesting, take what you need, but need what you take. I've always strongly identified with the credo of the Bushmen, and that leads me to another amazing indigenous South African, whose name coincidentally was Credo Mutwa. Credo was a traditional healer and author of books that draw upon African mythology, traditional Zulu folklore, and his own personal journey. But importantly, he also understood the need for man to live in harmony with nature. I guess it was this identification with the indigenous people of Southern Africa that drew me to Native American history, culture and law, which became very much a part of my soul. In fact, in my office in Sydney hangs the speech of Chief Seattle to the American leadership in 1854, imploring them to respect nature and to live in harmony. His most famous words are, "Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons of the earth. If men spit upon the ground, they spit upon themselves. This we know. The earth does not belong to man, man belongs to the earth." I also have a prayer of the Sioux people on my wall, and there's one sentence in that prayer that I try very hard to live by, and that is, "Make me strong, not to be superior to my brothers, but to be able to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ever ready to come to you with straight eyes, so that when life fades as the fading sunset, my spirit will come to you without shame." I also share with you that so important has Native American philosophy been to me that my former wife once told me that she was convinced I was a Native American in a past life. Chiefs of other tribes who I had the privilege of knowing include Chief Mangasutu Buthelezi of the Zulu Nation, who I worked with in creating an organization called the Rhino and Elephant Foundation, which was the first organization that fought to save the rhinos. The other great chief who I worked with in Botswana was Ian Khama, who later became the president. He was the son of the founding president of Botswana, Sir Seretse Khama, when we were negotiating with the tribesmen and chiefs in the central part of Botswana to establish the Khama Rhino Sanctuary. However, I think the highlight for me was perhaps meeting South Africa's most famous son, Nelson Mandela, in August 1991. Nelson Mandela was the son of Chief Henry Mandela of the Madiba clan of the Xhosa-speaking Tembu people, and that is why to many he was called Madiba rather than Nelson. And now I move to the third part of my life, the branch that took me to Australia, where I found friendship with many Indigenous people who I'm honored to call my brothers. At the peak of these friendships are my ties with the family of the late, great William Cooper, about whom Barbara has authored several books, and I'm especially grateful to her for giving me the honor of launching some of these books at the Sydney Jewish Museum in 2020. My relationship with the Cooper family goes back to 2007, when I was contacted by the Israeli ambassador, who told me the story of William Cooper's brave protest to the German government about their treatment of Jews. At that time, I headed up the Australian office of Israel's foremost deforestation agency that Barbara referred to, the Jewish National Fund. The ambassador asked whether I would be prepared to arrange for the planting of 70 trees in honor of William Cooper in 2008 to commemorate the 70th anniversary of his protest following Kristallnacht in November 1938. Of course, I readily agreed, and the rest is history, because 12 members of the Cooper family, headed up by his then 81-year-old grandson, Alfred Uncle Boydie Turner, joined me and several other dignitaries in the Martyrs Forest just outside of Jerusalem to plant 5 of the 70 trees, with the remaining 65 being planted in the South Australian Israel Twin Friendship Forest in the Negev. This is what I said at the ceremony, I beg your pardon. And Abe Schwartz, I think, is online. Abe was there, and he actually asked me once if I'd written out what I said, but I didn't, because it came straight from the heart, and I remember those words to this day. I said it was almost inconceivable for me, growing up in South Africa, where Indigenous people did not have the same rights as others, to think that an Indigenous man in Australia, who also did not enjoy full rights in the country of his birth, should have found it within himself to stand up for the plight of the Jews in Germany. William Cooper's protest was a remarkably brave and selfless act by a man who I called in 2008 the Martin Luther King of Australia. I now head up the Australian Friends of the Hebrew University, and thanks to a generous donor, last year we established the Galimja William Cooper Memorial Scholarship at the Hebrew University for an Indigenous Australian to undertake postgraduate study in Jerusalem. I've been privileged to have participated in several events and ceremonies honoring the memory of brave William Cooper. Galimja, by the way, means brave in Yorta Yorta, the language of Uncle William, and I treasure my friendship with Uncle Boydie and other family members. In my role with JNF, I was also privileged to host a debate in Sydney comparing the Jewish outlook on the land and that of the Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal representative at the time was Uncle Max Dalamanman Harrison, one of the most impressive people I've ever met. I learned so much from him regarding the respect that Indigenous Australians hold for the land and its inhabitants. I was incredibly sad when Uncle Max passed away in 2021. I was also very honored when I befriended and assisted an Aboriginal man who had been through some very rough times and was not in a good way. I will just refer to him as Des. Des became an artist of repute, and he generously gifted to me some of his works of art, including a beautiful painting, an Aboriginal walking stick. I collect sticks, a spear and boomerang, but what I value most are feathers from a wedge-tailed eagle, apparently a gift of major significance in Aboriginal culture. I suppose it's no coincidence that back in Africa, I headed up an organization called the Africa Raptor Information Center, which dealt with birds of prey. I have a daughter who, no surprise, is a vet in New Zealand. And I guess it's my affinity and respect for Indigenous people that resulted in me being chosen by Maori leaders to participate in a traditional ceremony in Tauranga in 2006. And I'm looking forward to visiting New Zealand again this December and seeing my daughter, who, beside her veterinary practice, runs a not-for-profit wildlife conservation organization called ARC. And I'm hoping to meet Cherie and Alfred when I'm there as well. My connection with Native Americans was rekindled in February 2023 when Abe and I were invited to meet a group of visiting Canadian Native American chiefs at a reception hosted by the Canadian Consulate in Sydney. So as a conservationist, I think I'll end off here with a further quote from Chief Seattle. What is man without the beasts? If all the beasts were gone, man would die from a great loneliness of spirit. Whatever happens to the beast soon happens to man. All things are connected, and indeed we are. It is in this spirit that for the last almost 40 years, I've been involved in a multi-faith project, certainly one that appeals to the Abrahamic religions, to conserve in the Holy Land endangered animals that survive from biblical times. Many people are absolutely astounded to hear about it. The project was aptly called Project Noah's Ark, and I served as its chairperson for many years. Thank you for the privilege of connecting with you all today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rob. I mean, that is absolutely amazing. What an incredible journey you've had, and what an incredible impact you have made and are still making. It's absolutely awesome to hear you share your story and your insights, and I'm sure everyone's been blessed by that. And so we now open it up to questions. I will just let you know that as the biographer of William Cooper, I do have his books on sale at the moment on the Indigenous Friends of Israel website, if you want to have a look. Between November 9, the anniversary of Kristallnacht, and December 6, the anniversary of the William Cooper and the League's protest to the German consulate. That's the dates that that they're available. So have a look, and you may be very interested. So how about we just, whoever wants to go first in asking questions, would you like just to put your hand up, please? So see where the reactions are down the bottom there where it says more. Please either physically put your hand up, or you can use the little icon to put your hand up and ask questions either of Mike or of Rob. And I'll ask Mike to unmute as well, so that either you or Rob can answer the questions. So have we got any takers here for questions? Just have a look through. Can I see anyone with their hand up? Okay. Yes, we've got, I think, Aaron with his hand up there.
Yes, a question for Mike, if I might. Obviously, behind all the fighting that's going on with Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran is the sort of dead hand behind it all. I mean, at the end of the day, and you're a military man, what can Israel really do to put a stop to the machinations of Iran, especially as they now seem to be in league with the Russians and the North Koreans and a few other bad actors?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Ari, because it's not just Israel's problem, it's our problem. In fact, it's the entire liberal democratic world that's under threat from this really unholy alliance between Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. And where it's become very insidious is the technology and the cooperation that they're creating now in their information warfare operations. So it's really having a great effect in countries like US and Australia, where they're poisoning particularly the minds of our young. And so there are very definitely things that Australia, Israel, all of us in that liberal democratic world need to do to cooperate to fight that information warfare battle. And DARPA in the United States, which is an agency for research and advanced technology, has launched 3 projects in that respect. And I think that should be made part of like AUKUS Pillar 2, but we should keep close our connections and conversations with Israel about that too. So that's one thing. Hopefully, there are fault lines appearing in Iran as well. And we have really strong support in the Persian community here in Australia for Israel. And, it is a very, very tightly held police state, with every aspect of life monitored, etc. But there are signs of that cracking. And if we can continue to keep up extensive and really full court pressure on Iran economically and diplomatically, that we call out their heinous wars of aggression, which is a crime under international law that it has launched against Israel, but against other countries as well. The subversion, the terror, their form of diplomacy is to maintain pressure points on everyone through the threat of violence and war, and it's part of their imperial, ambitions. So we need to really make sure that narrative underpins a really stronger diplomatic approach that hopefully might bring about regime change in Iran. In the meantime, we just have to make sure that we're all uniting behind Israel to fight the military capabilities of Iran. And Russian capabilities have been shown to be very inferior, and the Iranian stuff is only marginally better in some ways. The Russians have depended heavily on Iranian drone technology, for example, and Iran is now building a factory in Russia for those drones. So they are cooperating so closely together in this military sphere now, but their technology is inferior. And so Israel demonstrated just recently that they're immune effectively to the air defense systems in Iran. And I think have destroyed some of their war production facilities that didn't get highlighted and publicized, including a drone factory and the factory that's concentrating on weaponizing their potential nuclear capability. So if you can't weaponize it, you can't, do anything with it. So, we just have to make sure we're continuing to encourage the US to maintain that military threat against Iran, the deployment of their assets and forces. And in the meantime, just, unfortunately, Israel is the sharp end of this spear doing our fighting for us effectively and losing lives in the IDF, which is just tragic. And I have family there, and we're all really worried about, the young kids who are in this fight, as well as the, even mature veterans and reservists who have been called up. So, we have to pray for them and just hope for the best in their fight and get behind them and continue to fight this information warfare battle, each and every one of us, to try and maintain that support.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I believe Miriam had her hand up. You got a question, Miriam?
Miriam?
Yes, Miriam, would you like to ask your question?
Can't hear.
Mhm. Maybe she needs to unmute. Mute.
We can't hear you, Miriam.
You're not muted.
Mm.
You
Yes,
could perhaps ask her,
just speak up.
you could ask a question through the chat.
Yes, we can't hear you. So maybe put your question in the chat like Rob suggested. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to ask a question at this point?
I just wanted to thank the speakers. Thank you. They're both very inspiring and informative. So thank you. It's been really great. But I'm just wondering if we can do more to get our government to support Israel. Very, very concerned about a lack of support for Israel from our Labor government.
Yeah, Miriam, I guess I should
Yeah.
take that on. I see the question from Carly there about Penny Wong and the latest statement she's made. It is really deeply distressing for all of us in the Labor Party and being in the progressive world to see that is where the main battleground is right now. You know, the coalition have been very unequivocal and clear voiced about all of this, and they're getting rewarded for it by the Australian public. And so, Labor, we believe, is sort of cutting its own throat by taking this sort of Hamas-like position, even though they claim that they understand that Hamas is part of the problem and that can't be part of the solution. But every step they take is pandering to the erosion of the United Nations, which pains me because I spent a lot of my life trying to improve the United Nations and working closely with that organization to improve their peacekeeping capabilities, etc. And now they are just basically a legitimizing mechanism for autocracies. It's made up of increasingly of countries who aren't democratic, and it's just being used to mask their crimes and legitimize them. And the institutions are corroding in front of our eyes. So, Labor should be standing up against that and joining in and trying to marshal up the Western liberal democracies to take a stand and fight back on these attempts to, subvert the UN. And every time they make one of these statements, they just do further damage, and it's not contributing to the peace process. The timing of it too is appalling in that it can be seen to be rewarding terrorism. We've thought about tearing up our cards and just sort of walking away, but we feel like we can't do that, that we have to, they are in government, they are the alternative party of government when they're not. We have to fight this fight from within and just persevere. But it's going to take, a lot of hard work, and we try and do it at every state and federal conference. We were successful in New South Wales recently, and I have to say that one glimmer of hope is that some of the big trade unions, their members hate this support and boutique, sort of infatuation with the Palestinian extremists, and are telling their union leadership to shut up and get on with looking after their conditions and pay and etc. And one of those is the HSU, which is going to be the largest union in Australia. And when we founded the Labor Friends of Israel, the first person to ring me was the secretary of that union, saying, "Thank God you're doing this. Tell me whatever I can do to help." Because the communists and the Greens are trying to use this issue as a wedge to take over the union movement. So there are people out there who want to fight back, and so there may be signs of hope for the future there.
Thank you, and keep on fighting. Thank you.
Carly.
choice.
Thank you. So, Carly, did you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I think it's a big question, but I was so, and I think so many of us are disheartened by Penny Wong's comments regarding, uh, calling it a sovereign state of Palestine. And I wondered how that can be changed and whether it is just a new change of government will change that and rectify that and ratify that as being incorrect, or can she change it herself with pressure that we can put on her, writing letters to her and really standing firm?
On the website that Labour Friends of Israel established, there is now sort of a automated process you can plug into to send emails and volumize that to the politicians. And it's important because I can tell you, my friends and former friends and colleagues, they were swamped with this well-funded email campaign by APAN and whatnot. And it got a lot of these younger MPs, they were like rabbits in the headlights and really affected by that email campaign. And then beyond that, now we have their offices being vandalized and etc. So yeah, I try and do that. It has an effect. So, but Carly, I think your point, we kind of start to feel that ourselves that maybe they need to get a stint on the bench to sort their crap out, and in this critical time when we just can't afford government to be, weak-kneed about
Yes,
this.
I will just comment that, that atrocious decision made recently by the Australian government, it still has to go before the UN General Assembly. So there is some time there, but I don't hold out much hope, considering a majority of the nations are supporting that resolution. But we still need to keep the pressure on how we can. I think Dahlia was wanting to ask a question.
I just wanted to thank you very much, Michael, and of course, Robert, for very informative talks that you had. One of the things that I find, okay, we are in a very dire situation at the moment in relation to Israel and the world and Australia, which is, of course, very I'm an Israeli Australian. I share my life between the two countries and I'm there most of the time, and it's very painful what's happening here. But one of the things that I feel that we are lacking, and that's what you're doing, Michael, and of course, Robert and others, is education. People really don't have no idea of the background, have no idea of the connections, and they just spread these horrible stories. As you said, they don't even know where Israel is or what's in the river to the sea means. And these are the things that I think basic education, not to us who listen to the news all the time, but even at schools and other places where they have to grow and the knowledge has to become a natural thing, It's just, that's how we come to this situation. If people don't know the background, it's very easy to get the masses into something which looks like something to get hold of, to do something, an activity which is meaningful, but it's not, they have no idea of what they're doing here in Australia, for example, with those masses that join. So, we always seem to be the victims of something. And I think in Australia, one of the things which I love about Australia, that we are all equals. So why would one community be standing out or one community be attacked and be allowed to happen in Australia? And this is something which really needs to be addressed. And I don't care which community it is, whether it's a Jewish or non-Jewish or any community should not be singled out for whatever reason is happening in another part of the world. And because here we are all supposed to be equal. and it's very painful.
Do you
So
want to
basically,
respond?
what I
Sorry.
want to add on that for many years, I've been doing Israel advocacy here in Australia. And one of the things that when I started it, I understood there's a lack of knowledge. I traveled around Australia with the stories of what I saw in Israel and what I brought here. But also the Israel-Australia connection, which was mentioned before with Doc Evett and the vote. So for 20 years, I've been having this event to educate. People didn't know before about that connection. And we have a very strong connection with the establishment of the State of Israel. Equally should have been also an Arab state, see, at the same time. And 77 years later, today, they're still talking about having a Palestinian state, which was actually supposed to have another Arab state. So education.
Absolutely. And, Dahlia is doing a wonderful job there. This is the 20th year this year that she's held the Celebrating Israel event to commemorate, Resolution 181, isn't it, of the United Nations to divide British mandate into a Jewish and an Arab state. And as she said, Australia's role with Doc Evett and others has been so important in 1949, etc. I'm wondering, Rob, if you would like to comment on that at all.
Sorry, I couldn't hear it properly. I don't know if there was something wrong with my connection. Can you just
I think part of it was the need for education. And
Yes.
so one of the avenues has been what Dahlia has been doing with the Celebrating Israel event now for 20 years.
Absolutely. And I think that on a political level, or a governmental level, what AJAC is doing is nothing short of remarkable. But I'm saddened to have heard from a very prominent journalist a couple of weeks ago that, they can write as many pro articles as they like, but if it falls on deaf ears, it's a great problem. Now, I walk and swim every morning at 5 o'clock at Bondi Beach. And some years ago, some of you may remember there was a cartoon about Muhammad, and some Muslims went a little bit crazy in Sydney that weekend. I happened to have been in Brisbane. I go to Brisbane often because my oldest son lives there. When I came back, a gentleman who I don't go to the beach to socialize, but this guy stopped and spoke to me, and I said, "Gee, did you see what was going on here over this weekend?" And he's a well-educated, I'd say upper middle class, non-Jewish lawyer, and he had no idea about the partition plan. He had no idea about the wars. He just saw Israel always as the aggressor. And when I started talking to him and telling him about the partition plan and that all the wars were foisted upon Israel, Israel was never the aggressor, he said, I hear things differently, but it didn't change his views. Now, I start to think that that's due to peer pressure. And I know I had a visiting professor here. She came here in about May. She was supposed to have been here for a year on sabbatical. Unfortunately, her collaborator was at Sydney University, and this Israeli professor was made to feel most uncomfortable. And her collaborator, they went away together. They actually went up to Kakadu. And on the way back, her collaborator said to her, why is it that you won't allow the Palestinians to have their own state? Whereupon this Israeli professor answered her in no uncertain terms. However, she believes that did not change her collaborator's views, because many people are scared to be seen to be going against all these protesters. And by the way, they could very well not be the majority, but it is time that we heard from the so-called silent majority. Some of the people that Mike is talking about, some of the people that I've heard about who don't agree with what's going on. Do something about it. Write letters to your MPs.
Well, thank you for that. And look, I know that there are many people in Australia working on the issue of education against anti-Semitism. As Indigenous Friends of Israel, we also have a campaign going. And if anyone wants to help with that, we have a GoFundMe campaign to help us with our public education campaign against anti-Semitism. Part of it is we're working on some units from prep to grade 10 that promote social cohesion and work against anti-Semitism and will fit in with the current national curriculum without having to fight the battles of changing the national curriculum. So I think that's quite an important step as well. I'm wondering if Cherie, Dr. Cherie from New Zealand, if you're still with us.
I know she's left.
I think
She's
left,
gone
yeah.
now, has she? And
No, she left.
Abe, did you want to comment at all?
I think Abe may have left as well.
Abe. There's an
Okay,
Abe.
John Lockwood's raised his hand. John, would you like to make a comment or ask a question?
Yeah, good. I'm just in the background, sitting back. Mike, great to hear and Rob your stories. I don't know, Michael, if you know that we're about to launch, or under the chairmanship of Andrew Wallace MP from the Sunshine Coast, we're about to launch the Israel Allies Caucus, which will be an international recognised body of supporters for Israel around the world through parliamentarians. At this stage, we've got about 43, 44 potential parliamentarians, upper and lower house. We're missing the Labor people completely, unfortunately. We'd love to have some Labor politicians who would be prepared to, unofficially join or be supportive. But what we're hearing is that within the Labor Party, if you lift your head to say that you're a supporter of Israel, you're not very welcome at the moment. What are your comments?
Yeah, it's really a tragedy that we used to have a very strong element in the caucus back in the day when I was there, which we called the falafel faction, and it was made of very strong and effective leaders, really, and that was the key. There were quite a few people in the Labor caucus who were on our side and sympathetic. They just needed to be organised, and so unfortunately that is gone. And so I just ran into Senator Glenn Searle the other day. He's a Western Australian senator who's still out. He came to the Never Again Is Now demonstration on the parliamentary lawns, but he said to me that they just don't know what to do, and that they stick their head up and they get it blown off. It's so the missing leadership is a real issue. So we've got to get people elected who and we're losing Bill Shorten as well shortly, and he was probably one of the only couple of voices in cabinet that would speak up, unfortunately. But it's part of this is to build the pressure from the grassroots, but also to come back to another point that I really do believe there's this great big body of the iceberg beneath the surface of the loud and nasty activists. Which includes like the Hindu community, the Sikh community, the Pacific Island community, the Persians, the Filipino community, the Thai community, etc. And there were large numbers of them killed, the Filipinos and Thais during October 7th. So, and there are 20,000 subcontinent people working in Israel now, and 80,000 more put their hand up to go and back them up for the loss of labour from Palestinians and called up IDF, etc. So just in the Queensland election recently, these communities are often the people that keep their cards close to their chest and don't want to, sort of speak up and be seen to comment on politics. But the Hindu community in Queensland in the last election, they'd had enough. And so they started actually networking and they actually made public statements. And they're really ticked off about what's going on. And I think you can start to see that in the surveys that are showing the drift between the Coalition and Labor is expanding on the issue of security. And a lot of that has to do with the way people feel safe about where they live in Australia, particularly when they see these activists desecrating our war memorials, committing vandalism and violence, etc., and the Greens fomenting lawlessness and encouraging them, etc. So it's creating a backlash. And the more things they do, like preventing Myers from doing Christmas decorations, the more ground they will lose. So that's one thing. I'm really annoyed that my Labor colleagues, I went to a Israel Alliance, that one of the first activities they set up in federal parliament when they had Natasha housing, the British lawyer who's been so, very effective. She came to visit the parliament and they had an event for her. I was the only Labor person there and I'm not even sitting in parliament anymore. So it's disturbing, but, I'm very pleased what they're doing. I want to salute Simon Birmingham, who's been he's a wonderful person, a liberal. And we had him at the Union of Progressive Judaism conference here in Canberra just a week or so ago. He spoke really well. So I just, I'm happy to work with colleagues on that side and just promote these things, and we'll just persevere. But I'm sorry that you've been disappointed there, John. It's unconscionable.
Well, it would be good just to keep contact with you and bring you up to date with what's happening with the caucus. And there's a foundation that's going to be sitting behind that will be open to all supporters, Christian and Jewish, Labor, Liberal, doesn't matter where they come from. So, and Barbara and Norman, are very much part of all that we're involved with and have been very supportive. And Barbara and Norman, I think Amir arrives here tomorrow in Hobart. So the next couple of days I've got with Amir, who's become a good friend of yours and is a good friend of mine. He's the Israeli ambassador to Australia. And we're having dinner down here for him on Wednesday night with 5 parliamentarians from the Tasmanian government. So that will be an auspicious occasion for Tasmania anyway, and we're very much looking forward to that. So thanks, Mike.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And, it's also, we were really blessed when we were in Canberra for the October 7 events at the Israeli embassy. And the following morning, Norman presented a very large boomerang, about 2 meters, to Amir at the embassy. And he said then that he would like to honour William Cooper. And so there's a proposal at the moment, which is Amir's proposal, to have a plaque honouring William Cooper on the adjoining walls of the Israel and German embassies, on the adjoining fence in Canberra, hopefully on December 6th. So that's in progress at the moment. And we're also working with John's group, Scaffy, on a December 6th event in Melbourne, honouring William Cooper and those who protested with him against Kristallnacht, start of the Holocaust. And the idea of that event with Christians and Jews together is to try and have the silent majority, as someone's already mentioned here tonight, to come out and show support for social cohesion and against anti-Semitism in Australia. So there are things happening. I know at times things can look bleak, but there are positive things happening as well.
I have to say too, thank you, Barbara and Norman, for your work in the Indigenous community. And, you've got a friend there in Nova Peris who's just been really courageous and done a lot of great work. She spoke at our UPJ conference as well, and it was really powerful. And I know all of the Jewish participants just felt uplifted and supported in the powerful way she gave that speech. And they're going to put the speech, she did put it in writing, and she's going to put it on we're going to put it on the UPJ website. So encourage people to go and check that out.
Wonderful. It's a little hard to hear you there, Mike. I wonder if your sound has gone down a bit.
Right. I'll just.
Or is it just me?
Could be. No, it might be the connection.
That's
Is that
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, just encouraging people to sort of follow Nova and hear her speeches, and she's doing great work like you and Norman. So really appreciate everything that you guys are doing.
I would like to acknowledge that as well, as far as Barbara and Norman are concerned. They're at virtually every event. Their uplifting messages and their support is tangible, and we very much appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Rob. It's
Thank
been
you.
great to work with you as well. And we are very happy also that Nova Peris has been standing up the way she has. That's been great. And people like Warren Mundine as well. That has been great as well. So look, if no one's got any more comments or questions, we might end there tonight. Has anyone got something really on your heart that you need to say before we finish up tonight? Otherwise, we'll thank you and head off.
Now? Do you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Miriam.
Oh, I changed something on my setting. Oh, praise God. This has been a wonderful thing. I'm just so encouraged as an Israeli that's lived here 47 years. I just say amen and amen to everything that Michael said. That's my husband's name. And Rob, I only wanted to mention quickly that we have, because you were talking about the endangered animals in Israel, how they're trying to make sure that they don't die off. And so there was this Jenna Levinsky from Canada that brought Jacob's sheep.
Miriam, I saw that in the chat, and they're an amazing couple. They came from Canada, and they brought Jacob's sheep back
and
to
the red
Israel.
heifer is so controversial because the red heifer, and there's only like about 2 that are still eligible for this, and it's scaring the Arabs crazy because they see that this is going to be a fulfillment, that the temple would be built quickly, after they sacrifice the red heifer. So anyway, people can Google those subjects and be aware, and because this is big. I've even seen along the highway red cow, and I know what they're referring to. And a big sign, and so people are aware of this.
Might have to re-enlist that.
I just enjoyed both of you so much. I'm just, I guess I'm the only Israeli. Well, no, the woman, she's Israeli Australian, and I would like to connect with her. But if I'm the only Israeli, I just say thank you, thank you, thank you for all you're doing. That we have to fight against anti-Semitism and be educated. And I recommend World Prayer Network because they do tell so many things about Israel for people around the world to pray and how to pray. And of course, they've had reports of Israel time and again, especially lately. And thank you for your prayers. I wear this yellow. I've been wearing this more than a year, and I just pray for the miracle of God that they will cut off the electricity, the water, that they'll come up out of the ground or do something, because we're getting very impatient. As you can see, that's why there are people demonstrating in the streets, and they would even want the war to end, but we cannot end the war. No way, not on any front at this point. But we want to see our hostages back. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much, Miriam, all the way from Israel. That's wonderful that you were able to join us again tonight. And I want to thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm going to thank Rob and Mike for your wonderful presentations, and thank you for Lillian for looking after the chat for us. And just to let you know that this is our last one for the year. We won't have one in December. What we're looking at doing next year is because we have a number of Native Americans and Canadians who want to join us. What we'll do next year is we'll have 1 month will suit Australia, Pacific, Israel, and the other month will suit the North American audience and do it like that. So we can have more people to join us, like Grand Chief Harvey Yesno and others. So over to Norman to say goodbye to you all and bless you all.
Well,
Thank
wonderful.
you.
What a wonderful night. And as Barbara mentioned, that this is the last for the year. And it was certainly saved the best to last. Dr. Mike Kelly and Robert Schneider and them friends that we've met for the very, very first time. And
friends
our
too.
friends as well. It's been such a blessing. But importantly, that we have met you. You're our friends now and family. And thank you all for being friends of Israel, as true friends as you are. So keep up the good work also that each one of you are doing. And we will see you very, very soon. And thanks, Dr. Mark Kelly, for the yarns that we had while we were in Canberra. And not only did you speak well tonight, and Robert Schneider, thank you. Very, very impressed. And I know that many on here tonight have been truly the things that you've shared really hit our hearts, and I know that we can all make a difference. Adalia, I know your events are coming up very, very soon. I know we will see you and Robert very, very soon
Rob.
in
Thank you.
Sydney.
Thank you for
And for
coming and
those,
joining. It's really
we will, we
a
will,
blessing. Yeah,
we
thank you.
will, we will see you all very, very soon. Good night. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.